Welcome, everyone. It is great to see the turnout we're already showing in the chat box with folks from Iowa and Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, South Florida. I would encourage all participants to open up your chat box and let us know where you're coming from. We are glad to have you here with us today as AARP Virginia hosts a dynamic grandparenting session. Today's topic is academic cooperation, and it is one of a series. We're hosting these dynamic grandparenting workshops virtually once a month. And a little bit later in the program, I will give the link for next month's program. My name is Brian Jacks. I'm a staff member at the AARP Virginia State Office. I actually reside in Bedford County, Virginia, and I'm pleased to have our state president from AARP Virginia, who will be our main presenter today. I want to ensure you know what AARP's mission is and why we would do something like this. Well, let me start by saying that AARP is the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to empowering people 50 and older to choose how they live as they age. With a nationwide presence, AARP strengthens communities and advocates for what matters most to the more than 100 million Americans 50 plus and their families. That includes topics such as health security, financial stability, and personal fulfillment. AARP also produces the nation's largest circulation publications, AARP the Magazine and AARP Bulletin. Well, as you might guess, what matters most to AARP members? I would venture to guess that grandchildren rate pretty highly in that regard. We're thankful that you're here today. Obviously, the topic of grandparenting and grandchildren matter to you. I'll let you know that our structure for the day will be to walk through a presentation by someone who is both an educator and a grandparent herself. But before I give that introduction, I will mention that at the conclusion of this workshop, we will plan to leave time for questions and answers. If you take a look at your Zoom window, you'll notice in the bottom there should be a button that shows a question mark and has the letters Q and A below it. If you would hover your mouse over top of that and click, it will give you an opportunity to place a question in the queue, which we will attempt to answer at the conclusion of today's session. With that, I would like to introduce Joyce Williams, our presenter for the night. Joyce is a retired public educator, teaching government and world geography for much of her career. She retired in 2004 as the principal of William Byrd Middle School in Roanoke County, Virginia. She's been a member of Roanoke County School Retirees, District P, and the Virginia Retired Educators Association, as well as the National Retired Teachers Association, which is a division of AARP since her retirement. After her retirement from public education, she taught at Hollins University in their Masters of Arts in Teaching program. She has supervised student teachers at James Madison University, Longwood University, and Virginia Commonwealth University. In her career, she was devoted to our youth and the teachers who would be teaching our youth. Since her retirement from higher education, Joyce has devoted her time to the aging among us as a full-time volunteer. She volunteers with the local Office on Aging in Roanoke, Virginia, and has been a volunteer with AARP for the past decade and a half, serving as AARP Virginia State President for the past 5 years. During her service as state president, she has worked hard to improve the collaboration of the Virginia Retired Teachers Association and AARP Virginia. Joyce is the mother of 2 and grandmother of 4. Both of her children and 2 of her grandchildren are AARP members. After an extended period of time being the caregiver for her husband, Dean, whom she lost early in 2020, her passion has become working for and with others who are, like herself, are facing the challenges of aging. Her goal is to help us find the joy in aging. With that, I hand it over to you, Joyce, for dynamic grandparenting tonight. Thanks for being with us.
Well, thank you, Brian, and thanks to all of you who have joined us this evening. I am so excited about the possibilities um, ahead of us. And my mission, Brian mentioned AARP's mission. My mission is to get you excited about the possibilities. And I have to tell you that today is a super special day for me because, and don't panic, Brian, when I say what I'm about to say. Um, I am high on life today, not because of the drugs that I'm taking, because I had knee surgery last week, but because my middle granddaughter called me today, or actually she texted me. We don't call anymore, we text, to tell me that she is expecting. So today I found out that I am going to be a great grand. They call me grand. I'm going to be a great grand, and it is so exciting to know that I've got a grandchild coming along, that I too may be able to influence their thirst for learning. Um, I say I want to get you excited, and I'm really, I would really prefer if we could be doing this in person, but from all the states that you're from, that would be a little impossible. But I want you to recall, and I suspect that some of you are hopefully many of you are grandparents yourself. Try to imagine um, the teacher in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Do you remember him? Ben Stein played the role, um, and he was the antithesis of what we want our teachers to be. Um, so I'm going to try to be enthusiastic. I hope it comes across that I am. But I have to know, well, first let's look at our agenda. Um, we're going to talk a little bit about best practices. We're going to talk about age appropriate help, excuse me. We're going to talk about some subject areas. And then at the end, I'm going to issue a challenge. But before we do that, they say we really need to know our audience. And so, um, in order to get to know you and what your circumstance is, we're going to do a little avalanche exercise. Call it an icebreaker, call it whatever you want. But what I'd like for you to do is to put your cursor in the chat as if you're going to make a remark. Pull up the chat, open it if you will. It's down here at the bottom of the page. When you open it, you'll get an opportunity that to type a message here. Excuse me, I need to take a sip of water. And in that little space right there, I want you to put the ages of the grandchildren that you may be working with, you may be influencing. All of us are influencers, and we're going to talk today about how, as grandparents, we can be really positive influencers in the field of education. But whatever you do, don't hit send yet. Thank you, Edie. I'm sorry I didn't talk fast enough. But put your uh, ages of your grandchildren in the type the message here block. And once I ask you to hit send, we're going to have an avalanche of ages that are going to flip up the screen. So I'll count to maybe 10 so that it'll give all of you time to put the ages of your grandchildren in, and then we'll see what they are. Okay, are you ready? 3, 2, 1, send. Wow. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Lisa Hoyt is a local person. I know Lisa. She is a teacher herself, and gosh, she's got a bunch of them. Thank you, Lisa. Oh, I'm looking back through. Many of these are very young. Sandra Bullock has a 2-year-old. One granddaughter, age one on the way, a 7-year-old, and a 19-year-old. Interesting, interesting. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. Um, we're actually going to try to cover as much as we can in terms of all the ages, but these are how I've categorized them so far. Infancy, and by the way, Brian didn't mention the fact that he is a granddad. About a year ago, I think in February, was it not, Brian, that you had a new grandbaby girl?
That's right. We celebrated 1-year-old birthday 2 Saturdays ago. What a blessing.
Yes, no kidding. Um, and so I imagine that she's entering the toddler phase because it's about a year old when they begin to try to toddle. So
Yep.
we're going to address the toddler age, the elementary age, the middle school age, the high school age, and beyond. Um, but first, I said in our objectives that we want to look at best practices. And so um, one of the things that I can't emphasize enough is to foster a positive attitude. Now, let me say here that I acknowledge the fact that not all of us have the same relationship with our grandchildren as all the others of us that are part of this group have. Case in point being, we have a grandparent in Maryland whose grandchildren are in Oregon, and she put a little sad face when she put that in the uh, chat a few minutes ago. So sometimes they're long distance. Other times, we have more and more, and we're hearing more and more about grandparents raising grandchildren. And so we may have some on the call today who have more of a parental relationship with their grandchild than perhaps a grandparent's relationship. Excuse me again, I'm dehydrated. I'm going to have to sip all the way through this meeting, and I apologize for that. So we have to recognize that relationships between grandparents and their grandchildren may differ. Um, and if there are parents in between yourself and your grandchildren, um, there needs to be conversation with the parents about how you might be able to interact. And as I go through these best practices, um, I'll veer off just a little bit. But first, I want to say, please try to do what you can to foster a positive relationship and with your grandchildren. And by that I mean, if you are a grandparent raising grandchildren, you have to be the disciplinarian, you have to be um, the mama and or the daddy. And so playing the grandparent role is you have to split your time between being parent and grandparent. Well, the best thing that you can do is encourage a love of learning and enthusiasm and curiosity, regardless of your role as grandparent. Um, and more than anything, I would say I miss the classroom. I miss it so much. I loved my career. I loved to see the light bulb go on over the heads of kids when they began to understand a concept that I was trying to get across. Um, and and if you have to be a tutor to your grandchild, and if you can afford it, hire a tutor. Because what I want your relationship to be with your grandchild is that of one who's not necessarily pushing to achieve, but just being encouraging to be curious and having enthusiasm yourself and using positive reinforcement. Positive reinforcement and praise can go a long way in building confidence and motivation. Um, Always create a friendly study environment, but I want you to think about how we can be learning all the time, and not necessarily when you're sitting at a table, whether it's a kitchen table or a desk in a bedroom or what have you, but we can be learning all the time. But best practices say that when we're trying to do some serious learning, the tutorial kind of learning, that we should have a quiet, well-lit space, free from distractions like TVs and telephones. And goodness only knows, telephones are a distraction. Notice this young man has uh, earphones on. Those earphones might be feeding him information, but it also might be keeping out noise. So think about how you might use those. And of course, we know historically that to encourage reading is one of the best things we could possibly do. And I know you're noticing this person with probably her daughter here who is, uh, or son, shouldn't be judgmental because he does have on blue jeans, or she. Anyway, sorry, I digress. You'll notice that this is more of an infant, quite possibly borderline toddler, but you'll notice that this is one of those cloth books. I haven't seen too many of these lately, but I'm sure they still make them. And just having a picture book for a toddler, um, starting really early, is super, super important, to encourage reading, all along to encourage reading. Sharing life experiences, and I don't mean just current life experiences. And here we have a grandpa fishing with a grandchild, um, but anything that's happened in your past, any stories that you can tell, your grandchildren are going to find you fascinating. First of all, they already perceive you as probably an old person. Um, but you can tell them about your youth and the joys that you had growing up, the joys that you had in school, um, learning yourself. Um, Stay away from the challenges a little bit if you can. Perhaps stay away from them completely, but I don't want you to mislead your grandchildren at all. But we'll circle back to that in just a few minutes. Um, Promoting educational activities. Brian mentioned that this is a part of a series, and one of the earlier series had to do with museums, whether it's the Museum of Modern Art, which is one of those uh, highfalutin, I'll call it, if you'll let me um, regress back into my Southern slang here, or whether it's less so. Here in the Roanoke Valley, we have a pinball museum, and AARP has had a number of events at our pinball museum inviting older and younger people together to come, and kids have found it as exciting as adults have, but not just uh, museums, but these museums can be of any type. It might be the symphony, but it doesn't have to be the symphony. It could be a musical group that your grandchild likes. You may not care for the music, but think about sharing the experience with them. If you have opportunities to travel, to visit museums in DC, for example, like the Holocaust Museum or the Museum of History. And speaking of Washington, DC, I just got a little click through my watch a few minutes ago that said, are you wondering when the cherry blossoms are going to bloom in Washington, DC? And I've clicked on it because I'm always curious, and it seems to get earlier every year. But this year, by the way, it's between March the 28th and March the 31st will be at its peak season. But what a great opportunity to share that kind of cultural experience. Focus on their interests. Now, we know that a lot of kids become interested in dinosaurs off and on. Maybe Legos is a something that they'll latch onto. Maybe a musical instrument, maybe airplanes, whatever it is. Focus on the strengths first and set the positive attitude toward reinforcing and building that positive relationship. But if you'll forgive me, I'm clicking when I shouldn't have. The really important thing is to focus on their interest. Don't try to necessarily influence their interest initially. While many childhood interests are passing, who knows? You may end up with a paleontologist from the one who liked the dinosaurs. You may end up with an architectural engineer or a musician or an airline pilot. Brian, I see your hands raised.
Great. I just really appreciate what you're sharing. And I know that I didn't mention that my wife is an educator as well, having gotten her elementary education degree through Purdue University many years ago. One of the fun things in reference to focusing on strengths is that um, sometimes people think, well, if we're studying planets or the kid's really interested in dinosaurs, that's a science-based activity. So I really need to think about the science museum or focusing on science. But in reality, especially in the early ages, my wife shared with me, hey, if our son is interested in dinosaurs, we're going to read about dinosaurs, we're going to write about dinosaurs, and we're going to even do math that involves dinosaurs, at those earliest levels, so that you can use that interest to expand their knowledge, not just in the field of science or on the activity of music, but say, what can we be doing to incorporate that love of learning in a way that incorporates many subjects together and kind of catches everything. And that also keeps the child engaged and involved because of their, inquisitiveness and desire to learn about that subject in particular. So I agree with you totally.
Well, and I appreciate that aspect of it because I certainly agree. You can turn a dinosaur into many, many, many more things than a science lesson, and
Yes.
you've exhibited that for sure. I do want to share with you that just recently I was in the General Assembly, and the Lego company had a room set up um, that people could come in and play with Legos, and they were there to lobby, if you will, again for hands-on learning and how valuable that could be. And I heard another member of our volunteer team that was there with me in Richmond to lobby mention that she has oops, I'm doing it again, that she has an acquaintance whose son is becoming uh, an engineer because of his initial love of Legos, which I thought was a fascinating story. But it just shows that it's not just mouth lip service, I should say, to say that these things could happen. They are in fact happening. We do know, however, that interests change, and as interests change, um, be careful if you've made an investment in um I don't want to say musical instrument because well anything and the child suddenly says, well, I'm that was last week. um just try to be as patient as you can with the change in interest because kids can be fickle. Now, we started out by talking about the or saying that we were going to address the different age groups. When you see an infant like this, you think to yourself, what could they possibly learn? Well, we know research has shown us that infants learn through all their senses, their eyes, their ears, their nose, their hands, their mouth. What do they, if you hand them anything, what do they do with it? They put it in their mouth because they're learning about what that thing that they're holding. Um, we get them to smile when we smile at them. We get them to mimic our voice when we try to teach them to say mama first before they learn to say dada, or whichever the case may be. We know that upon shucks, my computer thing is so sensitive. I apologize for jumping back and forth. Um, Upon birth, a baby's vision is only about 2400. but by the time they're 6 months old, it's 2020, 2025 or thereabout. And so much of what they see, they will learn from. Um, Hearing is critical too, singing songs, making funny noises. Um, here's where the learning begins with just play. Keep it simple. It's important to the baby's brain. Play is as important to the baby's brain as brain development as food is to the body's physical development. We know that neurons begin growing in the frontal lobe, and this is when memory kicks in. And then we have the toddler. Again, playtime. Keep the play though age appropriate. I know we have, and I was guilty. I know we have grandparents that say, "Oh, but my grandchild is the smartest grandchild ever." And even though a toy says it's from 3 to 5 years old, I'm going to buy it for my 1 year old because my grandchild can do all those things that Fisher Price says that 3 to 5 year old can do. Well, your grandchild may well be the smartest child ever, but these toy companies have spent megabucks on researching what age is appropriate for these toys. And the other thing is safety. So be careful with the safety um, aspects of it. If it says it's for a 3 to 5 year old, please don't think about buying it for a 1 year old. I put some steps there because as I was fortunate enough um, to be able to babysit my grandchildren, my first three anyway, grandchildren, um, when they were infants into their toddling age. I was teaching, of course, and off on weekends. My daughter-in-law, my son worked all kinds of shifts, and my daughter-in-law worked for a bank, and she worked crazy shifts, and some of those crazy shifts were on the weekend. So I got to keep them on the weekend. And one of the first things we did was learn to count as we went up and down the steps. Every time we took a step up, we counted. And there were, by the way, 13 steps from my basement to my first floor. But that's a simple little thing that we can do that sounds like fun. It was fun for the kids, and and they learned to count 1 through 13. After that, it was a little harder. But be that as it may, um, we want to be sure that we are engaging our kids, um, whatever they're interested in, making sure that whatever play we're doing is providing is safety.
I've raised
So,
my hand again, Joyce, if
yes,
you'll
go
let me.
ahead. I'm
And just
sorry. I didn't see it, Brian. Please.
no, it's okay. I'll just pop in again every once in a while. I also just really appreciate you mentioning the musical instrument piece, and certainly a 1, 2, 3, or 4 year old toddler is not going to likely be starting to play the cello, but it is wonderful to give kids these age a xylophone or a small drum or something, a kazoo perhaps, something that they can begin reflecting and understanding how music works, and that they can contribute in different ways. And that musical aspect is a form of learning, as you've already pointed out, and certainly using one's voice to sing along with music. And oftentimes, whether it's learning the alphabet or some other um, song, can be a helpful tool at these early stages to help grow a young person's mind and help them capture facts and keep them recalled to memory.
Well, and thank you for that. The toddler is also going to be interested in colors and perhaps is interested in candy. So what better tool could we use? Again, we have to be safe with these because toddlers can get choked. But M&Ms are a great tool for toddlers to use to learn colors, um, to count, um, and very early stages of math. If you put down 5 M&Ms or any little token of a thing, 5 M&Ms and blue M&Ms, and take 3 away, how many are left? Very early stages of math, but excellent uh, opportunities there. Uno is another game that early toddlers can use, not just for numbers, but also for colors. Um, it doesn't have to be something that we've gone out and paid a lot of money for. Go Fish is a perfect game for teaching numbers. Um, don't, however, forget the dangers of children putting things in their mouth. And no, here, trying to give, okay. So toddler to elementary. This is where we want to get the curiosity juices flowing. We want to provide opportunities. How many times have you said something to a toddler or a young elementary student and you get this question, why? And you answer it, and why? And you think you answered that, and then why? But here's where the basics of math and science and reading and writing are laid to prepare them for the more complex. And it's also where, by the way, we have the socialization of children beginning to take place. So we have to be aware of that too, and providing opportunities as a toddler for interacting with other children, especially if these are children that are not involved in any kind of daycare, is super important. And then the socialization of elementary school is important as well. But how do we get the creative juices going? How can we do that? Well, how about this? How could you use an apple to teach your children fractions? Well, I'm sure you're thinking right along the lines that I'm thinking you're thinking. Cut the apple in two and say we've got a half apple and a half apple. Cut the apple in quarters and we have 1/4 of an apple. Then we have 1/4 and 1/4 makes a what? Remember though, you're handling the knife and knife safety. And maybe we could graduate into something, maybe a pie. How about using a pie for fractions? We could do that. All right, how about the middle school? Here's where we begin to find challenges to begin in earnest. That socialization that's been so super important in the elementary schools. When we hear about children becoming disenchanted with school, very often it's in the middle school. But we can weave in creativity. Um, one of the best examples that I've heard from fellow teachers is to provide an arbitrary picture, excuse me, I went the wrong way, to provide an arbitrary picture and then just have the child tell the story of what's happening here, what's happened before, what are they doing now, and what are they going to do. This kind of storytelling can really progress into much more elaborate storytelling when they're in school and asked to write essays. Um, if you really want to get them excited, just give them a picture of this and say you just ran across a pile of money. Now create a backstory of how it got there and what's going to happen to it now. This can be an activity to provide insight into the level that your grandchild may have. and to encourage whatever creativity may be lurking there somewhere. And in middle school, math is often one of those disciplines that can sometimes get a bad rap, especially those among us who may have struggled with math ourselves in school. I'm going to ask you to keep your confessions to the confessional, because confessing to your grandchild that you never did get math can do untold damage with your grandchildren when it comes to learning math or any subject like that. It can give them the excuse that they may think they need to not be successful in math or any subject. So I try to steer away today from the don't do's, but that's one of the things that I would ask you to um, share your historical experience with school, um, but don't provide an excuse that they can use that, oh, grandma had trouble with math, so I must not be able to get it either. This is going to be a time where you might say, and this is a great tool to use, um, if they're showing you, if they're saying this is the way we do things now, offer them the opportunity to teach you. It might be a good time to say, this is a new way of doing things for me. Show me what you know about how to do it this way. Give them the opportunity to teach you. And not just in this circumstance, but in any circumstance where they have information that you might not know, ask them to tell you more about it so that you can become a learner as well. Model wanting to learn for your grandchildren. And here we are in high school. By now, we may find helping out our high school students to be really challenging. Um, you notice that I haven't mentioned anything about technology so far in any significant way. But we shouldn't disregard it, because this is an area where we might be able um, to utilize technology. We might have to use trial and error. Um, Also, uh, by the time we're helping them in high school, we should consider um, asking them what might be helpful to them. What is it that they may have learned in school that we could mimic, that would be helpful, whether it's flashcards or timelines or other devices. And one of my favorite, of course, is mnemonic devices. Um, we're all familiar with the acronym HOMES, where we learned the five Great Lakes: Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, and Superior. Um, how about an acrostic? Um, an acrostic is a sentence that might have the initial of a word, or the initial letter of a word, have some significance. Can anybody look at this um, and think of what the IVXLCDM might be? Well, if you guessed the Roman numerals, hey, yep, you did well. Um, I have had an awful time trying to remember if that 50's L, C's 100, because we always talk about a C note, money, $100 bill is a C note. But this is another way. If you need to help your child remember a list of anything, um, you might be able to use artificial intelligence to say, hey, what kind of acrostic or um, other device could I use to help my child learn this sequence of words or categories or topics or what have you? And also in high school, if you haven't heard about the Khan Academy, um, I hope you will look into it. It is a free, oops, I did it again, a free world-class um, education for everyone, anyone, anywhere. Instead of ads or subscriptions, they're supported by individual contributions from people like you and me, as well as from grants. I'm going to click on this link and see if I can if I can show you the topics that they have that are available. Is your screen changing, Brian?
I'm afraid that that would be tricky to do in this format because right now Zoom is recognizing that you're sharing your PowerPoint window.
Okay.
Um,
Well, it's not working.
how
But
about this? How about I take a look?
while I have it, let me just say that it has math pre-K to eighth grade. The high school courses in math go from algebra 1 all the way up to linear algebra, uh, multivariable calculus. Um, it has get ready courses for the elementary school, reading and language arts, all the grades from second grade up through the 10th grade vocabulary. It has life skills. It has Virginia math, by the way. I guess Virginia has a special math,
Wow,
economics, arts and humanities, and even computing. If you cannot, uh, if you'll simply, oh shucks, I don't want to lose you here.
you're good. You're good. We can see you and we can see this.
Okay,
I'll
all right,
mention that
here we go.
in the chat, someone has put in Love Khan Academy. So there's some
Oh,
experience
good.
there.
I'm glad to hear an endorsement,
Yep.
because I have been super impressed with it. Um, the thing about helping your grandchildren or encouraging your grandchildren to be successful in their own academics is good for you too. When I said that I devoted my professional career to young people and now I'm devoting my post-professional career to those of us of a certain age by volunteering with AARP, um, we have brain healthy habits. We have in we have a do-it-yourself speakers bureau kit where we talk about the 6 pillars of brain health. And one of the pillars of brain health is to engage your brain. And when you're helping your children, grandchildren in this case, with learning and encouraging their learning, then you're doing yourself a favor too, because engaging your brain is one of the 6 pillars of brain health that will make your brain continually healthy. Um, as far as our um, agenda was concerned, we've looked at best practices, we've looked at age appropriate health help, we've looked at subject areas. But I want to leave you, I said my mission was to create some excitement, but I want to leave you with my vision. And my vision is to ask yourself, in whatever circumstance you find yourself with your grandchild, how can I turn this into a learning opportunity? What can we learn right here, right now? Now, take a look at this picture and think about what kind of lesson you could turn building a snowman into. As a geography teacher, the first thing I thought of was a sphere. We have this head right here. It's close to a sphere. We could talk about shapes. What other shapes are spheres? I mean, I'm sorry, what other things do we know of that are in the shape of a sphere? It might be a globe, it might be the world, um, it might be a baseball, it might be a football. No, well, here we see a difference. No, that's not a sphere. Um, we could extend it to measuring the circumference of a sphere. in inches, and maybe calculate, if we're really doing higher level math, how many cubic inches of snow is in the head of the snowman. Um, I'm challenging you to think about whatever opportunity you find yourself in with your grandchild, to think, how can we make this a learning opportunity? It's not necessarily geared toward the SOLs. Here in Virginia, we have standards of learning. But if you make learning something fun and something that's natural and a part of everything you do, or at least much of what you do, um, you'll be successful. And then conversely, ask yourself, what can they teach me? Now, you and I might know how to play checkers, but do we know how to play chess? Young people may know what we don't know. So give them the opportunity to teach you something that they may know. If they say, let's play chess, don't say, I don't know how to play. Say, teach me. And even if you know a little bit about it, ask them to teach you what they know about it, to give them the opportunity. Um, as a tangential thing, in conversation, say to the child, I'm thinking about having a small garden this year. Would you help me decide what to plant? And what I've done here, and I said I've stayed away from technology, but technology's not all bad. We have apps now, it's a joke now. There's an app for that. We have apps now that can help us identify plants, it can help us identify birds. What fun thing would it be to take your phone out in the yard with your grandchild and take a picture of a bird, and then take it to the app and find out what kind of bird that is, and as much information as your grandchild or you might be interested in acquiring. The same thing I was thinking. I got when I had my knee surgery last week, AARP sent me a lovely um, arrangement. And I didn't know half of what the flowers were in there. So I got out my computer, my phone, which is a computer, by the way, and took pictures of the flowers and looked them up so I would know what they were. You can do that same thing with with your grandchildren.
Joyce, as I was thinking about it, I know that there is an app similarly that's designed to point out the different types of trees based
Yes.
upon both their leaves and their bark. And, for those that are at soccer practices or out at the ball fields, oftentimes there's some shade trees nearby. And to showcase, hey, look at this. Grandpa's got technology too, and here's a way that he's using it to stay abreast of scientific facts. And hey, do you have any idea whether this is a tulip tree or an oak tree or a maple? Well, let's take a look and see if what this app can show us.
Well, and there's even, little kids very often are intrigued by bugs.
Ah, yeah.
Um, there's an app for that. And wouldn't it be fun to to research, is there any poisonous kind of thing here? Are we safe in picking up this little thing? Um, anyway,
Hey,
I didn't want to get too far sidetracked
well, I'm
on
going to
the
add one more just
technology.
because you've asked me to monitor the chat. And so I'm going to add one that has come in with a astronomy app for looking at the stars,
Wow,
identifying
yes.
stars, and also constellations and planets. I've seen it.
And we are in a time frame where the planets are lining up.
Mm.
I think 7 planets were lined up for a time, and I've kind of lost track of days because I have been on drugs because of my knee surgery. But I also heard on the news just recently that at least 4 planets are going to be lining up pretty soon. But wouldn't it be cool to share that with your grandchild?
Mm-hmm.
All right,
Definitely.
I'm going to here say thank you. And by the way, we didn't mention Scrabble as a great way to help our children learn. Um, but we want to provide opportunities to ask your questions and try to provide answers. When in my classroom, when a child would raise his hand and say, "Can I ask you a question?" And I would always say, "Yes, certainly, but if I don't know the answer, I'll just make it up." Well, I won't do that here. But maybe together we can find the answers that you're looking for. So thank you for that. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen, Brian, so that
Yes, that looks good,
we,
and I
we
think both
won't
of
be
us are
distracted.
visible now. Excellent. I do have a few questions for you, but before I mention those, I want to encourage folks who are tuning in to please drop your questions into the Q&A box down at the bottom, or if you want to put it in the chat, I'll try to keep an eye on that as well. One of the things that you mentioned was modeling a desire for learning, kind of lifelong learning or continued learning. And just I was wondering if you had some examples of ways that those of us who are now outside of the school age, going to school or college, can demonstrate that we too want to keep learning, um, and that being a good model and example for our grandchildren.
Well, many of the things that we've talked about in terms of turning an ordinary situation into an opportunity to learn is one of the best ways that I know. But certainly being curious and interested ourselves in things that we might not be familiar with. Um, any way that we can do that, I think, can provide um, a model for our kids. Um, if if our grandchildren see us reading,
Yes.
um, just something as simple as that is a good way to encourage them.
Excellent. No, that makes total sense. So that's the pretty basic answer that I had not been thinking about. I was thinking about the ways that different universities, perhaps alumni organizations, showcase lifelong learning programs and have
Hey, hey, and a plug for LLI.
yes, yes, the Virginia Tech Lifelong Learning Institute, but also across Virginia, and I know in other parts across the nations, colleges are oftentimes now recognizing their alumni desire to continue learning by offering on-site, in-person classes as well as online learning endeavors. So, but thank you for saying, hey, every time that our grandchildren witness us reading books, spending time investigating an issue or a topic, that is good modeling and will pay dividends. Second question in reference to educational trips, and maybe the idea of writing or keeping a journal or a photo journal of some kind. Have you any examples, maybe not that you've done or that you've heard of people doing with grandchildren that is designed for memory making, growing a relationship between grandchild and grandson or granddaughter, but also involves educational component. It's not just going to Great Wolf Lodge and riding the water slides together, but has an educational component that you'd be willing to share?
Well, I would encourage educational trips for sure. Um, but we don't always have to call them that, you know.
Yeah.
Let's just let the education piece be incidental, intentionally incidental. But sometimes when somebody hears, "Oh, this is going to be educational," they may not be as enthusiastic about it as, "Hey, let's go have some fun." But I love the journaling aspect. And I think a really fun thing to do would be to share the journaling. Have the grandchild write his experience in the evening or in the evening after a day's experience, and then have
Yes.
the grandparent do the same thing in that same journal. That that is something that would probably be more precious to the grandchild than to the grandparent, at least later in life.
Yes.
But I think it could absolutely be a treasure.
Excellent. That's a great point. Yeah, you're building a memento of the trip as you go. And yeah, and that can be done at any age. Obviously, a 7-year-old is going to write a different perspective on the day from her perspective versus a 17-year-old. And yeah, that's something to give some thought to. Thank you.
Well, and
Um,
could I, Brian,
Please.
circle back to what your family did for me? Um, um, my husband was a storyteller. He was from originally from West Virginia, and anytime anybody was around, he was ready to tell a story. And our family um, loved his stories because he repeated them so often. It got to a point where, oh, Papa's telling one of his stories again. Um, and one of Brian's children was at the time taking a course in videography, and she came to our home for for to provide Dean an opportunity to tell his stories on a video
That's it, to
and
capture them.
to
Yep.
capture the stories um, because we really had missed out on the opportunity to record the stories for our grandchildren as he was telling them as they were growing up. But now they have that record of his experiences and his stories. So think about what you can do for your grandchildren in that regard. Um, all of our phones have videos on video components on them now, so it doesn't have to be professionally done. But what Brian and his family did for me was very professional, and we get it out every Christmas and play it because it's just precious. So little
Delight. Oh, I'm
aside
just so
there.
thankful that you gave one of my children the opportunity to do that. So thank you, Joyce. And we do miss Dean. We are right up against the 1 hour time frame. Thank you for all the remarks and insights. I do want to point people to the chat where I have dropped in a link for some additional resources that AARP provides to grandparents. These are free of charge and available to non-members as well as members. Feel free to point others in that direction. AARP recognizes that grandparenting is a big part of life, especially as individuals get older. And we want to make sure that we're resourcing and helping individuals in that journey. I'm also now dropping in the sign up registration link for our next dynamic grandparenting session. It's on the topic of conversation making with grandchildren, how to prepare for conversations so that grandparents are ready to go, can make good use of the time and use time well, and focus on topics that may be of interest to individuals throughout the stages of life. So kind of like what Joyce did today, focusing on youngest to oldest. I believe that our presenter next month has that same goal in mind, not purely on academics, but talking about individuals sharing stories and helping our grandchildren as they walk through life in the role that we can, in the influence that we have as grandparents. So I encourage you to take a moment to hit that link to register for the March 19th session on preparing for and participating in good conversations through life stages. With that, I'm saying goodbye on behalf of AARP Virginia. Thank you for being with us today, and we wish you the very best.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you again, Joyce. Bye.